Hello and welcome to the Disruptive Innovation Festival. My name is Seb Reed and I'm a member of the technical and facilitation team here at the DIF. And I'm also an author at Circulate, Circular Economy News focused website. The DIF is a 3-week-long online event that showcases the latest ideas, innovations and technologies that are reshaping the future of the economy. I'm very pleased to be joined this evening, my time, I think it's afternoon their time, by two people from the University of Montreal, who are going to be talking about assessing the circular economy and how to bring it into businesses. And I know that what they're really keen on is to get your feedback, your questions and your comments on what they present and the discussion afterwards. And there are two main ways in which you can do that. The first is by tweeting at us using #ThinkDiff. And the second, which is perhaps even easier, is to simply click on the comment section below this video embed. It may be a 1 or 2 click process to get to the comments and ask those questions in there. And we'll be feeding those through to Luce and Jeffrey during the session. Now, without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Luce now to introduce the topic and the event.
Thank you very much, Seb. I'm Luce Beaulieu. I'm the coordinator of the Institut EDEC. We are an academic institute whose mission it is to synergize researchers around the themes of environment, sustainable development, and the circular economy. We're located in Montreal, and our members span 3 institutions, which are HEC Montréal, Université de Montréal, and Polytechnique Montréal. We work with over 200 research units and 1,500 researchers, professors, and students. And in academia in Canada, we are aiming to be leaders in the circular economy. So now I would like to introduce Geoffrey Lonca, who studied general engineering in Lille in France. And he completed a master's thesis in energy sustainable development here at Polytechnique Montréal. During his studies, he became interested in circular economy while working on an electronic device management program. And at the moment, he is aiming to provide tools and ways to assess the circular economy. Geoffrey?
Okay, hello everyone. Thanks Luce for the introduction, and thank you Seb. Thanks also to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation for organizing this beautiful event, and thank you all for being here today on this online session. So yes, as Luce just said, I'm currently doing my PhD on circular economy with professors Manuel Magny and Sophie Bernard, who are professors at Polytechnique Montreal. And well, during this presentation, I want to introduce you to the essence of my project, to what really matters to me. Well, this presentation has been done in collaboration with the EDEC Institute, but I'm also a member of the CIREG, which is the International Reference Center on Life Cycle Assessment of Product and Services, and which is based also at Polytechnique Montreal in Canada. So, as you all know, today we are going to talk about circular economy and the stakes of its assessment. And to better understand what assessment is about, let's talk about first a particular product, a tire. Yeah, in fact, closing the loop of its life cycle is an interesting case to understand what circularity assessment is all about. And because, as we know, we are capable of retreating and regrooving this tire so as a major part of it can be reused while minimizing material value losses. And at the very end of life of this tire, other valorization ways exist, such as burning in cement clean processes, or recycling in molded products, or artificial domes. And that downcycling make a worse use of the original material value. And as material value is lost, environmental benefits from closing loop strategies are worsened. And although this strategy is better off rubber circularity, they aren't enough to achieve a best circularity level of the product. So that's why recycling in a closed loop system, that is to say, producing tires with a recycled content, should allow to increase this circularity level. But the question now is, do you think it also increases environmental benefits? And that's what we will try to understand today. So we'll first talk about some generalities on circularity assessment, on circular economy, so we can understand why its assessment is so important. And after that, we'll go through a case study on circularity assessment. And finally, we'll discuss on the results and see what it teaches for further research. But first, let's talk about someone we all know, and we can't imagine someone better than him to introduce the topic of circular economy. Well, I'm talking about Pope Francis. Well, Pope Francis has written in 2015 an encyclical letter on the care of what he calls our common home, and within which he says that we have not yet managed to adopt a circular model of production capable of preserving resources for present and future generations, while limiting as much as possible the use of non-renewable resources, moderating their consumption, maximizing their efficient use, reusing and recycling them. So basically what he says is that we are not in a circular model of production yet. And do you think it's true? Well, let's see how circular is our global economy. Well, also in 2005, some authors published a paper on how circular the global economy was in 2005. And well, the model used here is based on a methodology established by Eurostat in 2012. It's basically an MFA, material flow accounting. It's based on a mass balance principle. And here we distinguish three pathways of material flows of high relevance for circular economy, such as energetic use, waste rock, and material use. But here, let's put aside the details on the production of this diagram. And just all I want to highlight here is on what we can see about circularity. And we see here that circularity is only reflected by a poor recycling rate of 4% at the worldwide economy scale. And here for the European Union, it's just a bit more, a 10% of recycling rate. So yeah, definitely we can say that Pope Francis is true, and we aren't in a circular model of production yet. And maybe that's why we all have this talk today. But what I wanted to show with these diagrams is to raise the question if these diagrams really reflect circularity. Does circularity can be studied only by taking a picture of material mass flowing through the economy? And that brings the question of what really defines a circular model of production, as Pope Francis says. Or let's see now what defines a circular economy. Well, in gray literature, we can find a lot of different definitions on circular economy. And I think we all agree to say that there is not yet any consensus on it. But as an engineer, I prefer a more scientific approach of circular economy. And how about using the second law of thermodynamics to define it? Well, the second law of thermodynamics says that the entropy in an isolated system can only increase. And without going deeper into statistical physics, more simply, what it means is that in a system where no energy, no matter can be exchanged with the outside, the disordered state of resources can only increase. But it's important to notice that this law doesn't apply in closed system, where energy can be exchanged with the outside. So now, if we see the Earth as a spaceship in the universe, well, we all know that we receive energy from the sun every single day. So decreasing the entropy of the Earth necessarily implies to make a greater use of this solar energy to recover materials. But as we can all agree about that, I think the current global entropy doesn't really decrease. So what the second law of thermodynamics asks is whether our spaceship Earth is a closed or an isolated system. Or it's the same as asking, can the entropy of the Earth decrease? Or some authors who wrote on the living, the entropy correlated to the living, we could ask, does life on Earth inevitably lead to a greater state of dissipation for resources? Or some more challenging question could be, does the order can arise from chaos? Well, the answer is a matter of how our economic process behave. And regarding how inefficient is our use of solar energy, the Earth right now appears to be closer to an isolated system. Then now, why do you think is this a question? Is this question a circular economy concern? Well, because it matters to know in which way a circular model of economy is feasible and how close we can get to an absolute circular flow of resources within physical boundaries. And regarding the law of thermodynamics, the laws of physics, we can easily understand that solar energy is the key to a circular economy. But is it really enough in practice? So that raises the question of how close we can get to an absolute circularity. Or we can also ask, is a circular economy achievable? Well, as we just saw, there are boundaries set by the laws of physics. And in fact, this limitation is depending on the efficiency of solar energy use. And the solar energy use also is dependent on the technology. And in fact, the technological advancements set boundaries to our capability of recovering materials. And although technological progress seems to be continuous and limitless, it appears kind to be asymptotic. And not only because of human capabilities, but also because of the economic system we live in. And that is to say, the market behavior or the society at large. So if we go back to circularity itself, there are boundaries set by supply and demand mechanism for secondary materials in particular. And there are also some limitations set by social factors, but we are not going to go deeper in this consideration today. But those are some elements to identify the feasibility of circular economy. And the two letters are some levers on which we can act. So if a perfect circularity is not achievable, it can be always better off by acting on these levers. And now the following question is, on what extent circularity is actually sustainable? So as circular economy mainly focuses on preserving resources while providing economical value, the question of sustainability brings social and environmental concerns. So this can be formulated as a question of desirability. So that is to say, within feasibility limits, is each improvement on circularity also desirable? So the question could be now how circular the global economy should be. So we can imagine an idealistic way to achieve a perfect circularity, that is to keep resources underground. But as we can imagine in the current state of the economy, this can lead to some kind of social inacceptance. And because it risks to undermine the society welfare. Well, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, suggested to let 80% of fossil reserves accessible, which is consistent with circular economy objectives, but not really with economic growth. So this can be a kind of inacceptance. Well, the optimistic way to imagine a circular economy, at least the one we currently have, is based on struggling against ineffectiveness by maximizing the use of resources. But as we will see just after during this presentation, not considering the limitations can add some undesirable effects related to, in particular, to environmental concerns. And now a more realistic way to think the circularity is about adopting an optimizing approach where the limitations we just discussed become constraints we have to deal with. So it is essentially based on making a greater use of solar energy to recover materials, as we just saw before. Well, now let's try to quickly summarize what we've seen until now. So after considering how circular our global economy is or is not, we've tried to define it through a scientific approach. And afterwards, we have identified limitations to its implementation that lowers our circularity expectations. And then we've seen that we should not try to target circularity limits because of desirability concerns, which lowers even more our circularity expectation. And now I'm going to talk about the means. So we are going to focus our attention to what it takes to achieve a circular economy that is desirable within the limitations we saw. So the question now is how far we are from that state of circularity. And related to that, what really matters now is how to know it. How do we know if we are in a circular state of economy? So implicitly, the question now is how to assess circularity. Well, many tools already exist. We can talk about a lot of them, but we can distinguish some of them that are developed by institutes such as Circular Economy and some others. But these tools mainly aim at estimating the integration of circular principles within the organization. And they often appear as kind of survey forms and consist in a kind of judgment value from experts or consultants. We have other methodologies like the one established by Eurostat and or Granta Design also, which use the calculation methods like material flow analysis, the MFA, which are based on mass balance principles. And these tools are used to make a statement on a bill of materials, or as we could say, to measure resource flows. And in these cases, circularity is not directly measured, but it can be deducted. And then we have tools that are based on resource accounting that aim at estimating the resource deterioration. And those are more related to the consequence side of linearity. We are not going to talk about all of them, fortunately, but I'm going to talk only about the one that is currently set as the very first circularity assessment tool, which is the Material Circularity Indicator, the MCI, that has been developed by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation with Granta Design and released in 2015. And these tools aims at measuring circularity at product and company level. And basically, the MCI is based on 4 principles, which are the key parameters to the calculation. So we have the recycled content that is deducted from virgin feedstock. We have the end-of-life recycling calculated from waste directly to landfill. And we have waste from both upstream and downstream recycling processes. And from these parameters, we can deduce a linear flow index that is the LFI. And we can see that so far, there is not really much difference with the material flow accounting. But the difference now is that there are 2 other key parameters that are lifetime and use intensity, which are related to what they call the utility. And by adjusting the linear flow index with this utility factor, this is how we obtain the MCI. So basically, the MCI gives a number between 0 and 1. And even if the calculation allows some negative results, the methodology established proposed to replace negative results by 0. But now, well, let's go back to our tyre we just discussed at the beginning. And what we would like to know is if increasing its recycled content increases its circularity regarding the MCI. And we'll see if it also better off its environmental performance. So basically, I applied the MCI methodology in a case study of Michelin tires for closed-loop recycling through 3 cases with a different recycled content that are 10%, 4%, and 0%. 0%, which is the baseline scenario. And as we assume to be in a fully closed loop system, which excludes current waste treatments, the end-of-life parameter is taking equal to the recycled content corrected by the process efficiency. That is 80% here. And by using this calculation method, we obtain the following values for the MCI. So for the baseline scenario, without any recycled content, we obtain MCI equal to 0.1. And well, anyway, what we observe here is logically, as the recycled content increases, the MCI increases as well. But now, a life cycle analysis, an LCA, which has been performed by Michelin, is showing a very different perspective. Well, the life cycle analysis is a method to assess environmental impacts through 4 damage categories associated with all life cycle stages from cradle to grave. And the LCA shows that for most of the impacts calculated at the damage level, that the increasing recycled content increases environmental impacts as well. And this is mainly due to a decrease in the performance of tires during the use phase, and because of a degrading tire quality that lead to a higher fuel consumption. So we observe a global contradiction between circular performance that we calculated with the MCI and environmental performance with LCA. But well, if we want to adapt the MCI, so as circularity can be closer to environmental performance, we can use the lifetime as a proxy to in-use performance. So basically, Michelin estimated that a tire with a 10% recycled content lasts 93% approximately to a lifetime of a normal tire. So if we use the lifetime as a proxy, we have the MCI that gives us a 0.12 instead of 0.18. Which is lower than the 4% recycled content, but still higher than the baseline scenario. So even including the in-use performance, even if it better off the MCL value regarding circularity, it doesn't really reflect environmental performance. Okay, so now let's step back on the case study. Well, what we observed was a disconnection between circularity and environmental performance. And that disconnection leads to potentially compromise the performance of the whole product in terms of sustainability at large. Also, we have seen that this disconnection comes from a different systemic approach of both assessment tools we used. So we have the Material Circularity Indicator, the MCI, that assesses circularity of a product within the company boundaries, whereas on the other side, we have the life cycle assessment that measure the environmental performance of the whole product life cycle. And so this difference in system boundaries definition leads to a burden shifting on environmental impacts. About the burden shifting, some other cases shows that burden shifting can also be within circularity itself. That is to say, by improving circularity locally, we don't necessarily contribute to improve the global circularity. And this can be a matter of increasing energy consumption that is resulting in a kind of burden shifting we discussed in the case study, so an environmental burden shifting, basically. But it can be a matter of increasing material consumption to offset the lower quality of secondary material. And it can also be a matter of money savings, which is leading to a kind of consumption displacement. And this is what we call the rebound effect. And well, as we can imagine, we are far from decoupling the economic activity from resource consumption. And regarding the current state of the global resource consumption, we can easily say that the global circularity is suffering from a lack of consistency between micro and macro level in its implementation. And this disconnection leads to a kind of burden shifting. And that seems to be also a matter of how we assess circularity. Well, a recent paper written by a philosopher and an economist on fundamentals of a circularity indicator also support this idea of disconnection between micro and macro. So, yeah, if we refer to the laws of thermodynamics we discussed earlier, so if we go back to our spaceship Earth, we should be able now to understand what burden shifting is about. So, as we just said, the spaceship Earth behaves like an isolated system. So, by decreasing the entropy of one of its subsystems, which is the same as saying by decreasing the disordered state of resources, or also by increasing the circularity, this can lead to increasing the entropy somewhere else and even more. So in other words, increasing circularity locally can threaten the improvement of global circularity. So definitely what we can say is, as some authors published in the recent paper I mentioned, a circularity indicator should be systemic enough so as no burden shifting, no major rebound effect can be neglected. Well, now to conclude, as we all know, circular economy is still a young concept, and it really needs to be explored broadly. So what we wanted to demonstrate here in this presentation is that in the actual context, there is a strong need for an assessment tool related to circular economy. So this assessment tool, as we just saw, needs to account for circularity at macro scale so we can achieve the original objectives of circular economy. But it must account also at the micro scale to enable every circular initiative at every scale. And these are important elements so as new circular designs can emerge to overcome technological and socio-economic barriers, as we just discussed at the beginning. So, well, this is basically what my research project is about, and those are some key elements of the paper I want to submit before Christmas. But my future work will be on exploring circular economy through space and time dimensions, but also on the economic one, to propose a new way to create a more consistency between the different scales of circularity assessment. So thank you for your attention, and now I think it's time for a period of question.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Geoffrey. It was obviously extremely interesting, and we did have some questions that came in during your talk. So I'm not necessarily going to put them in the order that they came, but more in something that makes sense. So very interesting question that came in terms of the recycled content. The question is basically that recycled content is only a small part of circular innovation. And what about changing the business model? And the person refers to the service of tires rather than the tires themselves. And they're referring to a company called Enso tires, who are certified cradle to cradle. And so maybe Geoffrey, I know that maybe from an LCA perspective, it could be interesting to answer this question.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's true. We just talk about the recycled content case, but that was just an example of just to see how it's how the circularity assessment is disconnected from the environmental performance, as I just said. So this was a particular case, but I fully agree that we can have study other cases on other business models, and it could be interesting to see if it's more circular regarding the MCI than business as usual. But yeah, it was just about seeing that not every circular strategy always better off the environmental performance. So it was just a particular case, and I agree that it's not the case of every circular economy initiatives, but I just want to focus our attention on being careful of what you measure, at which scale, and what you measure. So yeah, that I hope it it's answer the question, but.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's another question that came in which relates to this last one. It came from Twitter. Basically, isn't doing something that uses materials better not a good thing anyway for the economy and the environment, given finiteness of resources? And perhaps, you know, it's interesting to maybe, from a life cycle perspective, I think it's interesting also to consider which life cycle, which area of the life cycle uses the most, it has the most damages, the most impact. And if I'm not mistaken, Geoffrey, from the studies at CIREG, I believe it's fuel use. So anything that has to do with how tires adhere to the road, you know, obviously has an impact on fuel use. And so basically, we're not just looking at resources, but we're also looking, you know, at the way that fuel, you know, which is a non-renewable resources, is used. So can you tell us a little bit more about that, perhaps?
Well, okay. So yeah, as we just saw in this case study that yeah, the burden shifting was mainly about fuel consumption, and as I just said, there are other kind of burden shifting that we could study in other cases, which are more related to material consumption in general.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a particular case of burden shift, of environmental burden shifting. But as I just said, there are also other kinds of burden shifting within circularity itself,
Mm-hmm.
and that compromises the global circularity. So yeah, that's basically what I showed, is that it's a problem of scale, and by using the life cycle assessment, we embed a larger scale, so in a life cycle perspective, and that's why we have the in-use performance that is assessed too, and which is not assessed in the MCI. So basically, in what I show by the MCI, by using the MCI, is not that the MCI is not good. It's just that um, as we think circularity now, the MCI kind of reflect what is circularity for companies now, and I just want to show that it's important to it's important the scale you consider in your assessment.
And so this brings us to some other questions that came a little bit earlier, and maybe we can circle back to those ones. I'm going to probably put 2 or 3 questions together in this one. Basically, there was some questions about, is there one tool, or is there a conjunction of tools that could be used to get a better picture of the situation? And I know that you're probably going to talk about scale again, but do you believe that there's a conjunction or more perfect tools to assess circularity?
Yeah, well, I didn't discuss about these tools in this presentation because it was too short to discuss about many tools that already exist. But in one slide, I showed that there are some tools that are based on what it's called exergetic analysis. That is really interesting because it kind of assess the material physical value of both matter and energy. So it estimates, it can be used to estimate the circularity of both energy and matters. So this is one tool that we have to see, to look deeper, I think, for circularity assessment. But there are also other tools that account for different scales or combination of tools, such as I think about table input output, and which can be used as combination with material flow accounting and LCA, which can be a very powerful tool to really embed different scales and the burden shifting we were talking about.
Hmm. And finally, there's another question which I think will round things up nicely. In terms of circularity assessment, do you think it's most valuable for businesses to tackle circularity, or is it better for governments and larger governance bodies to reflect about circularity on a larger scale? And I think it's a really key question.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, it's important. It's as important on both sides, I think, and that's the problem also I was pointed at. If you set objective to a national scale, they need to be consistent with companies' objective also. So that's the same problem of scale, and I think the need for an assessment tool that is consistent with these scales is important. So the different scales of implementation can go the same way.
Mm.
So I think it's as important on both sides to set circularity objectives. But I think also, and that's what I'm going to study later in my research project, there are some economic incentives that are really are more. Some are more. How do you say pertinent? How do you say
Congruent.
Congruent. Yeah. Okay. And we need to study that in more deeper. So we can choose the best incentives at national scales, and that's also a relevant question.
Thank you, Geoffrey. And we're about 3 minutes away from the end of our session. Maybe I can add something, maybe like another level to this, because we're talking about environmental burden shifting. We're talking about what makes most economic sense. We didn't really touch upon the social desirability of the circular economy, and I know that in the Ansperger and Bohr, the article that you mentioned, they talk about social desirability as one of the levels that could be assessed. So do you think that there's a way that we could also include social desirability in a circularity assessment?
Yeah, well, I don't know that much things about social assessing, how to assess social desirability, but I know that in macroeconomic tools we can account for social desirability, but it's kind of understood. That's one of the problems, is that it's kind of understood as consumption. So as the social welfare is consistent with the consumption level, and this is also something we have to I think to reconsider also in the social assessment of circularity.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Luce.
Back at you, Seb.
Great, thank you so much, Luce and Geoffrey, for that very interesting presentation. I think the key takeaway for me from the session is that these kinds of discussions and critiques of the things we use to measure effectiveness are crucial. So thank you for your contributions today, and thank you so much to the audience for your attendance and those questions that you sent in for joining the conversation. This session will be available on Catch Up, and if you're watching this session on Catch Up, then please do continue to contribute to the conversation by using that comment section below this video embed. If you do post a question or comment in there, we'll be sure to alert Geoffrey and Luce and pass it on to them so that they can respond if appropriate, or indeed just to let them know what you've commented. That is the end of the diff, and it's actually the end, not the end of the diff at all, actually. It's the end of this diff session. It's the end of diff day 7, which means we're nearly halfway through the festival. But it's very much not the end of the diff. We've got a huge number of sessions left, including a ram-packed day tomorrow, which kicks off at 10 a.m. I want to just point out a few of the sessions we have for you. At 11 a.m., we're looking at how circularity or circular economy can create value in emerging markets, using the example of India and giving you a sneak preview of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's research, which we published in December. At 12 p.m., we've got a session titled "The Future of Design Will Be Driven by Materials," which feels like it could be very relevant to what we just discussed here. It's a session that will showcase a lot of innovations you may have not heard of in the materials space. At 3 p.m, we're releasing our latest video, latest Headliner Act video with Sir Ken Robinson and Peter Senge in conversation about the future of education and the potential to design a system that is driven and more effective in the 21st century. At 4 p.m, we're going to find out how you can make beer from waste bread. At 5 p.m, we're talking about time and tested R&D, which is a fantastic session about biomimicry, including Beth Ratner and Michael Paulin. At 6 p.m, the Vegware team are talking about their plant-based packaging alternative to plastics. And finally, at 7 p.m, we've got a panel that will be discussing how the future and work and learning are completely intertwined and must be accounted for together. That's just one day at the diff, and there's so many sessions like this session. Loads are available on catch up. Make sure you go to the catch up section on the schedule and check out what you've missed and what you can still watch. It is available for the rest of the festival plus 30 days afterwards. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you once again to Jeffrey and Luce, and we'll see you hopefully again very soon on the festival.